Hi everyone, this is Alicia Kinder. I'm here actually recording this video from the beach, believe it or not. I'm here at Cherry Grove Beach in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, enjoying the week. Spent some time on the beach yesterday and wanted to get up early today and get this video done so that we could have a little bit of time to think and talk about Kelly Gallagher's book. That's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. It's called Deeper Reading. Get my notes out here. Comprehending Challenging Texts for Students in Grades 4 through 12. First of all, thank you so much for being a part of this video series. This is the first of 3 where I'll be talking about Gallagher's book. Hopefully my primary goal in delivering these videos to you is that I can give you some of the strategies that Gallagher talks in his book. So let me do the reading, and then I'll sort of break it down and deliver it to you in the video. And then hopefully, for those of you who have been kind enough to agree to watch this, you'll actually maybe learn a few of his little techniques that you can take into the classroom to help your students. So let's dive right into it. Today I'll be talking about the first third of his book. Just to give you a little bit of background, Kelly Gallagher is a secondary English teacher. He's been teaching in California for many years and writes prolifically about reading and reading strategies. This particular book is focused again on secondary students because that's really sort of his background, and he's talking about challenging texts, which, you know, if you sort of extrapolate the meaning of that, I think means longer books with deeper themes, more complicated vocabulary, that sort of thing. But you know, when you think about it, those same things can even be true for elementary school students too. Challenging, you know, that's just sort of based on your point of view. Oops, sorry about that. Anyway, I do think that there's some relevance there for kids who are of elementary age to get something out of some of these strategies. So let me talk to you a little bit about Gallagher and his philosophy on reading comprehension. He mentions at the beginning of the book that he's a huge baseball fan, and he's taken his 2 daughters to watch baseball ever since they were little girls. And when he initially, sorry, I'm having camera issues here. When he initially started taking them to the games, they only really understood sort of the very basics of the game. That when their batter was up, he would hit the ball, he would try and run as fast as he can around the bases, and then if he got home, he would score a run. And he, of course, noticed as he was watching the game that he was watching the catcher, looking over into the dugout for a signal from the manager and watching what was happening on with the second baseman. And he was realizing he was really understanding the game on a much deeper level. And he says that's a great metaphor for the difference between someone who can just read, literally read the words on the page, or someone who really has a deep understanding of what it is that they're reading. And so that's the framework he sort of leads us into in the introduction in his book, and starts talking about major strategies for getting kids not only excited about reading, but understanding a little bit better what they're reading. And I have to say, I agree with pretty much almost everything he says. There's times when I go, well, I don't, you know, I could see that from another angle, but you can tell that he's been doing this for a long time and has thought deeply about it and really has worked through the kinks in some of these strategies to make them more effective as time has gone on. Okay, so I'm going to hit the major points that he makes in the book. There are really 3 that stood out to me. There's more than that, but there are 3 that I really agree with. One of them, he says, how can encouraging students to think metaphorically deepen their comprehension? Okay, wow, I couldn't agree more with this. I think being able to think metaphorically is a huge, not just reading skill, it's a very important learning skill. The more we can make connections between things and other things, the better we're able to understand the world around us. And when we do that, we can do that in any subject. We can do that in social studies when we read a story about a time period in history and we read something that happened to someone and we go, oh, I remember something similar happened to me or happened to my grandfather or whatever. And suddenly we've built a connection. And thinking metaphorically allows us to tie concepts together, which is so, so important in reading, because really what we're doing when we read is we're decoding these concepts. And so what Gallagher does, and this is really actually pretty interesting, is he draws like a T diagram on the board. And one side he has, he writes the word at the top, that he wants students to give him sort of an idea, right? A concept on this side. And then on the other side, we're going to do an actual thing that exists in the world. Okay, so like a car, a monkey, a sandwich, whatever. And so, on the one side, it'll say things like love, jealousy, friendship, concepts, right? And then on the other side, backpack, sandwich, all these things. So then what he does is he has them write out, he'll use blanks and he'll say a blank from this side of the list is like a blank other side of the list because. So maybe it would say jealousy from this side of the list is like a backpack from this side of the list because it's heavy to carry around all the time. And he has the students do this, pair these words up. And then to take it even further, he will have them give reasons why. Why is it heavy to carry around? Because it can be a burden, to carry these feelings around for so long. So this exercise really gets students thinking metaphorically, and it's something he continues on throughout the year to help them practice that skill of metaphorical thinking, which I just think is excellent. And even little kids can do this. I don't think it just necessarily has to be secondary kids. They'll need a little bit more help, a little more scaffolding, but certainly it's something that even younger kids can begin to do a little bit. Okay, so that's the first, metaphorical thinking. The second one is what collaborative activities will help deepen their understanding. Okay, so he makes the point that you absolutely retain information best when you talk about it. And I completely agree with this. You'll find if there's a concept or an idea that really sticks out with you in a book or in a song or whatever, isn't one of your first thoughts like, I'd really like to share this with someone. I want to talk this out with someone, right? My friend and I who run together, we always say that, we'll save up ideas so that when we get together to run, we can talk it out. And I never forget those conversations because we spent a lot of time really digging in to something, to ideas together. We have a great rapport in sharing ideas and bouncing thoughts off of each other. So that's what Gallagher, is getting at here is if he can get his kids to really engage conversationally with a lot of these readings, it really helps them to not only retain what it is that they're reading, but understand it on a deeper level. Because, of course, too, the great thing about sharing ideas with people is they often read or see things in the text that we miss, or they have a connection to it that we don't have. So he suggests a couple of different ways to encounter collaboration. One thing that he does when he gets into really difficult texts, he talks a little bit about doing this with Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, so Shakespearean stuff, All Quiet on the Western Front, things that maybe kids don't have a deep connection with already, is he will give them an anticipation guide. And one of the ones he did that I thought was really interesting, and I would definitely use this, not just for Romeo and Juliet, but anything really that was complicated, is he gave them a survey, gave his students a survey, and it had questions on it that were related to themes in Romeo and Juliet. So it was heavy stuff, things like, I believe that disputes should be settled. If they can't be settled any other way, they have to be settled by violence. I believe that suicide sometimes is the answer. I believe that teenagers can truly fall in love. Okay, you're getting the drift of what he's doing here, right? And then he has them agree or disagree on a scale. And then after they read the story, they revisit their anticipation guide and talk about it. And he says some of them actually end up changing their minds after they've read the story. So, wow, what a powerful way to set up this complicated story for them. And make it something that they can relate to. And that's the third point. That's the last thing I'm going to talk about in this particular video. He talks about, well, let me just read it. He says, how can I help students see the relevance this book plays in their world? Now, we all know as teachers that the more we can get our kids to relate to what they're learning, the more excited they're going to be about it, the more engaged they're going to be, and the more they're going to remember it. As a substitute teacher, I use this strategy a lot because I like comic books. I like Marvel, so I always take comics or books about comics with me when I go into a classroom, because if I encounter a kid who likes comics as well, we've instantly got something to talk to and relate on. And there's so many great themes in comic books that I can tie in to other stories that we read. So it's such a great bridge building for me with kids when it comes to reading. But Gallagher makes the point that if we don't find a way to make challenging texts relevant to kids, then they're going to get bored with it, even if it's an excellent book. And he talks about his daughter reading Of Mice and Men and how, Grapes of Wrath, and which he thinks is a fantastic book, but she had no framing for it. She didn't know anything about the time period, didn't go into it with any kind of context at all. And so, of course, they handed her the book. It was summer reading. Read it over the summer, come back and talk to it. And he was so excited to talk to her about it. She said, oh, it's just so boring. So he sort of realized, well, without the right context, of course it's boring. You have to give kids something that they can relate to, some sort of relevance that they can have with the book. So he suggests some strategies, some pre-reading strategies, and this is huge for me. I am 100% about context. Always framing every reading, whether you're talking about the background of the author, the time period in which it occurred, major themes, facts about characters, anything you can do to give those kids a framework to start to relate to the story is important. He makes an interesting example, too, of the book, A Separate Piece, which I read in high school. He said he has a colleague who just absolutely loves that book. It's one of her favorites, and she's tried for years to teach it to her students. She teaches in a high school that's mostly Latina, inner city kids, and of course they can't stand this book. They can't connect to it. They can't relate to it. It's about two New England prep school boys. They have no cultural connection to this story. And so he finally suggested to her, maybe the issue is just the fact these kids just can't relate to this as much as you love it. There's just nothing for them to tie into. Maybe book choice is important in this instance. And instead of trying to force a book on a group of students who have really no ability to relate to it, it's time to consider another choice. This is one of those areas where I go, if it's a good book, we can all find something about it we can relate to. But I do see his point that if we're really trying to get kids involved and interested in reading, we got to give them stuff that interests them. If we can't do that, then we need to find ways, like I was talking about with the comics, to build a bridge between something they do like and this story that they're reading. So that I think that's an excellent strategy, again, that Gallagher points out in this book. Wondering if any of you guys have used any of these strategies yourself in the classroom or think that it's something that might be interesting to you. Please just leave a comment for me below. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you in part 2 in a couple days. Thanks. Bye.